All right, everyone. Good morning, or good afternoon. Actually, it's afternoon for me. So we're going to be talking about evolution some more. And this chapter is about what's called microevolution and macroevolution. And actually, this chapter covers a lot of stuff. It covers the origin of life, right? So where do we think life came from? What was a primitive Earth like? It also covers speciation, like how do species become other species? And then it covers all the diversity of life. And this is a general biology class, so we're just kind of scratching at the surface. You have to understand that you could take a whole semester class in evolution, of course. All right, so look at this. Understanding biodiversity, the unity and biodiversity of life. So how are living things similar and how are living things different? So look, what do we see here? We see hands. And so they're similar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're, all of them have 5 digits, yet at the same time they're different, yeah, of different species. So how are they similar? How are they different? And how the unity and diversity of life. All right, so look, life. How about life on Earth? Where did it come from? Honestly, we don't know. Okay. Did it come about spontaneously? Did it come from outer space? We don't know. We can do experiments to try to figure it out, but we weren't there. And right now we don't have concrete evidence. Okay. So it says life on Earth most likely originated from non-living materials. Species are the basic unit of biodiversity. So dogs are a species, cats are a species, wolves are a species, right? Their own basic units of biodiversity. Evolutionary trees, how are species related to other species? Macroevolution, so looking at all the diversity of life in kind of a large scale. So macro means large. Overview of the diversity of life. So all the different living things, they're the domains, the kingdoms. All right. So that is what we're covering in this chapter. So let's dive right in. Bam. What does that look like to you? Like volcanoes, right? Volcanic activity, the hot molten rock, right? And volcanoes release sulfur in the air, right? So the question is, where did life come from? Yeah. And so scientists are thinking of what was the primitive Earth like? It says life on Earth most likely originated from non-living materials. So we're trying to see, where did molecules come from? Where did macromolecules come from? Where did life come from? So we think that's what happened, that life came from non-living materials, okay? So complex organic molecules arise in non-living environments. So this is the early Earth. There was a lot of volcanic activity. There was hydrogen, there was sulfur, hot water, okay? So it says small organic molecules eventually formed, providing the building blocks of life. Earth's early atmosphere had almost no oxygen, okay? If we had done the lab, you would see that. Was filled with many compounds released during volcanic eruptions. There was a man named Stanley Miller. He was in his 20s when he did the experiment, right? And this is a picture of him older. It says Yuri Miller because Yuri was his mentor, and then Stanley Miller was the guy. Well, he tried to recreate the early Earth, okay, the environment, the types of molecules that were in the air, so hydrogen, sulfur, nitrogen, no oxygen. And then try to see, can we get organic molecules? If you look, this looks really neat, yes? So he was using light, okay? Because there was definitely storms and lightning and stuff like that. So what did he do? Stanley Miller, shown, right, that was the guy over there, and Harold Urey developed a simple 4-step experiment that demonstrated how complex organic molecules could have arisen in Earth's early environment. Okay, so this would be like the early environment, right? There was heat because there was volcanic eruptions. There was water. They got all the molecules from the primitive environment, heated it up, right? And so the moisture, etc., came up. They used electrical discharge, kind of like lightning, and then they let it cool. And then it says condensation of atmospheric contents. Okay. Within a matter of days, they discovered many organic molecules, including 5 different amino acids in their primordial sea. Okay. Remember amino acids, they make up proteins, right? So they made this primitive Earth, putting in the atoms that would be around, kind of simulated the environment, and they got organic molecules. So that was a really big deal, okay? Because remember, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids are going to be found in cells. So Stanley Miller experiment is a pretty famous one because of this idea of the primitive materials, and then we got some organic molecules like amino acids. Now, but we have not, I repeat, we have not been able to recreate life from non-life. Remember, if you remember the cell theory, all living cells come from pre-existing cells. So we have not been able to create cells from non-living things. So the Urey-Miller experiment, the first demonstration that complex organic molecules could have arisen in Earth's early environment. Under conditions similar to those on early Earth, small organic molecules can form, and these molecules have some chemical properties of life. Okay? But we don't see cells. We cannot create cells from non-living things. So we have to think about what are cells. Remember the phospholipid bilayer. So we have to have that. We have to have a membrane. Remember inside, we have to have some kind of genetic material, have to have DNA or RNA, okay? And the cell has to be able to reproduce. The cell has to be able to undergo metabolism. So we're thinking, okay, how could have these things have come about? Cells and self-replicating systems evolved together, okay? We think life on Earth most likely originated from non-living. Again, we don't know. And anyone who says they do doesn't, okay? We have to have enzymes. Remember, enzymes are molecules that speed up the rate of chemical reactions. So all the chemical reactions would go really, really slow without enzymes, so we have to have them. So have to have self-replicating molecules, right? So DNA, RNA. RNA, we believe, originated first, okay? If you remember, RNA was single-stranded. You have your phosphates and sugars, and you have your bases, right? And then it can help with reactions necessary for replication. Here's a fossil, and it says question mark, the earliest life on Earth, maybe. So this might be an exam question, okay? How old do we think the Earth is? And how old do we think the first living thing is, okay? So we think Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, okay? Billion. What does a billion mean? I mean, a billion sounds like such a huge number, okay? A million is 1,000,000, okay? So a million is 1,000,000. So there are 6 zeros, okay? A billion is 1,000 million. So there are 9 zeros. So that number is a huge number. We think that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. And for the longest time, for about 1 billion years, there were no living things. And about 3.4 billion years ago, there were the first cells. And it's like, okay, what were the first cells like? The first cells were prokaryotic. Remember prokaryotes? Those are like the bacteria. They're prokaryotic, okay? It says the cells that may have been among the first living organisms on Earth. Okay. So what is life? Life has to be able to replicate, right? Has to carry metabolism. So how did that come about? Okay, had to have membranes, a phospholipid bilayer. So did they come about spontaneously? Mixture of phospholipids, microspheres? How did we get compartmentalization? Again, we think prokaryotes were first and then eukaryotes. And if you remember, eukaryotes have a nucleus. So this is an important diagram. Okay, how did the first organisms on Earth survive? Most scientists believe that life originated on Earth, probably in several phases. So had to have the molecules first, right? Here's the sugars, DNA, had to have that first. Then had to have self-replicating molecules, so RNA, making RNA, and then had to have a membrane, okay? So had to have these things. So earliest life on Earth resembled bacteria about 3.5 billion years ago. So now, okay, so if that's true, so for the longest time, there were only prokaryotic cells, so single-celled organisms. Then eventually we started getting multicellular organisms. And then within the multicellular organisms, there's so much diversity. By the way, within the prokaryotes, there are so much diversity, okay? So here we see flowers, okay, and different types of flowers. So lilies, roses, right? Hibiscus, tulips, right? Orchids, different types. So within plant life and within animal life, if you remember, plants have eukaryotic cells, so do animals, okay? So how do we have all this diversity, right? So species are the basic unit of diversity. So we're switching now, okay? So we talked about life really generally. Now we're getting into species, all the different types of living things. So here, humans, same species. These guys are different species. They could look alike, they could look different, okay? So what characterizes species? What is it? So biological species concept. Here it is. Here is a group of elephants. So what are species? By different books will say it differently. What I will say is species. They live in the same area. It says populations of organisms, right? They do live in the same area usually. The biggie is they can interbreed. That means they can have sex and then they can have babies, okay? Or could possibly breed under natural conditions and are reproductively isolated from other groups. For example, think of, I don't know why, I'm thinking of tigers and lions, right? Tiger King is a big thing right now on Netflix. Ooh, don't watch it. No, I don't know. If you want to be entertained, watch it, but it's not the best of humanity by far, okay? So think of tigers. Where do they live? Think of lions. Where do they live? Do they live in the same area? No, right? Tigers like in Asia, India, lions in Africa. So they're not in the same area. Then, but they're both cats, right? Then would they breed with one another? Would they have sex with one another? The answer is no, okay? They have different mating rituals. They wouldn't breed with each other. Now on Tiger King, okay, they show hybrids. Hybrid, it's a mix, okay, with one species and another species to create a hybrid. We have a lot of hybrids with plants. Horticulture, dealing with plants, we like hybrids. They do a lot for us. With animals, we can create hybrids too. And there's this thing called a liger. It's like a cross between a tiger and a lion. And on Tiger King, they have it. It's huge. It's this huge organism, right? But it would never happen in nature, okay? So it's not its own species, okay? So here's species, okay? Herd of African elephants in Namibia. Namibia, yes. Population of organisms that interbreed with each other or possibly breed under natural conditions and are reproductively isolated from other groups, meaning they won't breed with other groups. Okay. Oh my gosh, what is that? Whew, that was scary. That is called a zorse. Okay, zorse. Do you think it happened naturally? No, okay? It's a cross between a horse and a zebra, and it did not happen naturally. Even if they could be produced in captivity, organisms that do not naturally occur in the wild, such as this zorse, the offspring of zebra and horse, are not considered a species, right? So they actually interbreeding or could possibly interbreed, that would be a definition of a species. And natural populations, okay? So in nature, there are barriers to reproduction. So why, wouldn't they breed with one another? We're going to stop here and then we're going to have the next video in a sec.